Welcome, everyone. Everybody hear me okay in the back? Yeah? Okay, good. Well, welcome. Really excited for the conversation we're going to have this afternoon. And hopefully it won't go too far into the night, but we've got a lot to talk about because this is just going to be a lot of fun. I want to welcome you here for the Simon Community Weekend event that this is a part of. It's really important to us to celebrate our community and stay focused on maintaining our tight-knit community. We've got prospective students, alumni, staff, even some faculty around in the audience. Bringing the whole community together for these kinds of conversations is something that's really important to us. That it reflects the values we have on continued shared learning and bringing everybody together. The conversation tonight, this afternoon, will be with a real shining star of our alumni. I'm so thrilled to be able to have the conversation tonight. And there may be a little bit later, I don't want to tease too much, but there might be a little surprise part to that too that we'll get to in a bit. But I want to introduce Efrain Rivera, who has been just an outstanding example of the kind of leader that Simon produces. Efrain was a graduate from Simon in 1989, and you might do some math, but that was like 2 or 3 years ago. And already he's achieved amazing things in his career. So he was a former CFO at Bausch & Lomb. He was a CFO at Paychex and senior advisor to the CEO. He has been serving on boards across private and public companies, across sectors. This is somebody who really built his career through time and leveraged the learning here at Simon. And so I'm excited to talk with him and have him share insights about that career and all the learnings he's had through that and perspective on some current trends and issues. So without further ado, let's get started.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a really tough one. First of all, welcome back to Simon.
Yeah, thank you.
It is so great to have you here.
Thanks.
And I'm just thrilled to be able to have you talking with the audience this afternoon. So the really tough starter question is, tell us about your career journey to the C-suite, including where and how the Simon MBA fit into that path.
First of all, it's a real pleasure to be with you all. When I was asked to talk, I reflected a lot about my experiences here and how pivotal they were. As each of us looks back at our lives, no matter where you are, towards the tail end of your professional career, in the middle of your professional career, just starting or thinking about your MBA, there are these pivotal moments that will pop up, and I think coming to the Simon School was one of those. By the way, just as an aside, I told this story. I visited the Simon School in May of the year when I enrolled, and it was 94 degrees in Rochester. So this isn't always 10 degrees. So, but it played a really critical role in my career journey. You know, one of the things that Simon talks about a lot is ROI, and I faced that because I was transitioning, had an unusual path, which now is not so unusual, but was unusual then. I had gotten a law degree and decided that I wasn't going to continue to practice law for the rest of my life. I got to that point and I wanted to do something in the business area. And so I had this issue around the ROI of stopping sort of at a good point in my legal career and going 2 years to go to business school, and would that pay off? So the first thing I had to recognize was that bet was the answer to that question, and that bet was only one that I could provide. But I will say this, that investment, those 2 years that I took, that many of you may have either taken or in the process of taking, was one of the best decisions that I ever made. I did that, went through the program. I ended up being a finance major at Simon, and ended up then, I call what happened to me was I took a lateral demotion in my professional career. Sometimes you have to. And then started a trajectory up where, which culminated in my becoming the CFO of Bausch & Lomb. And then eventually took a little time off when that company went private, and then started another career as CFO at Paychex, where I left a couple of years ago. Now I'm on boards and a number of other things that I do, including private investments that I managed. I can't get there. It's almost impossible to envision getting there without the experience that I had here. Because I had a sense of, I was an analytical person by nature, but I didn't have the tools. And I will say this, my experience of where things in business particularly are heading is that the ability to analyze business issues, no matter what set of tools you have, has never been at a greater premium. And people who know how to do that and who do that and apply it well will do well. So that's a little bit of my career journey. Simon was a very important part of it, and I don't think I get where I've traveled without Simon.
Thank you for that. That's it's really telling. You are somebody who did the Simon education, but you've also encouraged others to do that.
Yeah.
We'll come back to that theme in a little bit. What are the kind of specific skills or the kind of ways that you see Simon preparing students for the future of business today that you think are most important for us to be thinking about?
So I was thinking about this in the context of a talk that I recently heard. So there's a very famous scientist. He actually happens to be brilliant, but his name is Larry Brilliant. Okay. Who is Larry Brilliant? Well, Larry Brilliant is credited with being the person who was part of the team that eradicated smallpox in the world. And think about that. He eradicated smallpox in the world. So what's that have to do with the question? Well, he was talking to this group I was in, and he was talking about the use of data. He was use of AI, and he said one of the things that we learned in order to get to the point where we could eradicate smallpox was understanding what he called NOCs. He called them non-obvious correlations. So now, if you've been to science school, you know that the first lesson you learn in stats is correlation is not causation. All right? We know that. That's spurious correlations. But what was interesting was, he said, it was one of these non-obvious correlations around how you deliver care to people who you think could be smallpox carriers that created a breakthrough that led to the intervention, which eventually led to the eradication of smallpox. And I'm thinking there and saying, that's really interesting. Now I thought back and I said, you have to have a set of analytical skills that permits you to distinguish between a spurious correlation and a non-obvious correlation that may be very important. I would say this, I'd argue this, that I think the Simon School excels at that. So lots of people can tell you these things are correlated, and lots of people can tell you that's important or it's not. But not that many people, and I think as we go forward, the ability to draw those conclusions. By the way, one of the things that he was saying was, we're building models to help us understand these non-obvious correlations, when they're spurious and when they're not. And I thought that requires a certain kind of language and understanding of how you look at the world and how you look at data. And I would say this, that ability to think analytically that way is something that Simon does, I think, better than, at least comparing to other people that I've interacted with, better than anyone else or any other school. And in my career, it served me very well, because I can think of specific situations where the application of those analytical skills were really part of what helped address an issue. By the way, I just want to be very clear about something. These are skills that are important, not just in finance. I happen to be in finance, but I think they're important in HR. I think they're important in marketing. They're important in operations across a number of disciplines. I think that Simon really excels in that, and I think that skill is becoming even more important than it was before, because machines can do a lot of the things that we could do before. They can't do some of that stuff. I think the ability to do it is going to become very, very important.
Thank you. That's one of the things that I hear over and over speaking with alums is the ability to handle the really tough problems and to be able to identify the opportunities that are below the surface, the ones that are harder to see.
And Mitch, it's interesting. So I have a friend who's a colleague who teaches at Harvard, and I was thinking about this because he was telling me about this case study that he was going to present. So I heard the case study, and I heard the conclusion that was being drawn from it. So he was explaining this to me, and I thought, there's validity to that. And I thought to myself, the problem with that approach, and I'm knocking Harvard, great school, et cetera, but is the learning in that context transferable to other contexts? Is it generalizable in a way that you can say, I can get there from here because I've got this tool set? And I walked away and said, I'm not sure. I think you get some interesting anecdotal information, but I'm not sure you're going to be able to apply that in the next situation that sort of looks like that. Maybe you will. But the analytical tool set that you get, the way of thinking, you can apply across a bunch of different disciplines. And that's what I found helpful in my career.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I want to shift to the conversation a little bit.
Yep.
We learn a lot at Simon, and you leverage those skills, but we learn a lot from experience too. And I'd say as much our successes as our failures. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious if you could help relate kind of a failure either you had or that you observed, and talk about what you learned from that, what you take from that, and how that shaped your experiences.
Yeah, it's interesting. This reminds me of the famous interview question where you're asked to describe your weaknesses. What's your weakness, right? And so everyone, fumbles to figure out, and they say, and the joke is that people say, I have an intolerance for incompetence. That's my weakness. So, look, I have made I bracket it into two parts. The decisions we should have made that we did not, and the decisions we made that ended up being erroneous. So I would say during my time at Paychex, there was a part of the business that we had an opportunity to enter, a market segment. And it involved doing an acquisition. and it would have been expensive by our terms at that time. I was very much in favor of doing it, and there was a lot of opposition to doing it. And I did not pound the table hard enough. And because I did not pound the table hard enough, we didn't do it. And it cost us. It cost us, and later, others who were involved in that decision agreed that it was not good. And why was that? I think because we can talk all day about data and analytics. It's your ability to be able to present in a moment that's critical and influence other people. So if you're not thinking in that way in important decisions, how do I get this point across? I think you're going to miss a moment. So I clearly missed a moment. I would say the other failure, if you will, was when we were going, Bachelon was going private. I was part of the management team, and I understood what needed to occur in order for the transaction to be successful in a shorter time frame. I didn't advocate strongly enough around it. And in the end, that was a moment where I missed an opportunity. And again, same thing. I think certain things could have been very different, but it was an experience where I felt like I didn't do my best work there. I stepped back and reflected on why, and I used it for the next opportunity, and I was fortunate to do that. And I would just say this: failure is not final. If you have the capacity to reflect on why, it becomes an important learning experience. And I think that sometimes we are running too much, and if I look back and say, I would have been a little bit bolder, because at the end of the day, you learn from every one of those experiences, and it makes you better if you have the intestinal fortitude to deal with the blowback when it comes. So I would say those two things.
Oh, that's great. I mean, there's two things that I hear from that really resonate with me: the reflection, and the importance of that reflection to keep moving forward. And making sure that transforms those experiences into a strength down the road. The other piece that really resonates with me is the need for the influence skills. So important. We can do all the analysis, but at Simon, one of the things we've really emphasized is teaching those influence skills too, so that students can really shape the decisions and really shape where the leadership team starts moving, or whatever team they're on.
And I think the interesting thing about those influence skills is you think they come in crucial moments, but those crucial moments will appear at times that you don't expect them. So your opportunity to step forward may come in at a time, and it's happened in a number of places in my career. It may come at a point when you weren't expecting it. If you're not prepared to think about that you may not be prepared for the moment. It's not catastrophic. I don't want to make it seem like, okay, there's one chance in life and you miss it, that's it. That's ridiculous. But it is important to think about that.
I'm going to turn the topics a little bit
sure.
again. Employer hiring. So you've been in the C-suite and boards, interviewed lots of senior leaders. What's the attributes, what's the skill sets that make someone really stand out in the hiring process, and how can people position themselves to really grow to those kind of roles?
So, I've been fortunate to hire a lot of really good people, and been fortunate to identify when I didn't think there was going to be a good fit. And when I say and chuckle about that is that person-job fit is really important. And by the way, I'm not saying that there's a raft of academic literature that agree. What's person-job fit? What are you talking about? It's your set of skills matched to the context in which you are applying for work, or you're applying. I'll give you an example. So Mitch said that I'm on 2 private equity boards and 2 public company boards, and I've been involved in CFO transitions or searches in every single one of them. Those are 2 completely different profiles, completely different. In private equity, timeframes are much, much faster. Does that mean the model is better? No, it's a context, that's all it is. In public companies, they're thinking much longer range. So when I've interviewed people, I've said to myself, what context am I asking for or is required in this context? What context is required in this one? So I would say this, what's non-negotiable table stakes is good powers of analysis, good analytical abilities. You're always going to be asked in a job interview, give me specifics about how you handled this, this, and this. Give me specifics about why, what you learned from this. And if you can't answer with some level of specificity, it's going to be more challenging. I went through an interview, it lasted about 4 hours for a CFO, and it was, tell me what you did in this situation, and tell me what you learned. And in this situation, what did you do? And in this situation, so you need to reflect a bit on what it is that you bring to the table, and don't put yourself in situations where that fit isn't the right one for you, so you need to do your homework. So, but you need to evidence also a couple of things that people are looking. One, I mentioned the data analysis, specificity around what you've done, analytics. The other thing is how you managed and worked with teams to get to the result. The worst situation in a job interview is for you to say, I, too many times without referring to other people and working with other people, because you'll be branded a solo or lone wolf, which is not where you want to be. So I think the combination of those 2 things, and obviously skills that are specific to the role that you're asking. One of the big differentiators, by the way, between a private equity CFO and a public company CFO is, and you'll hear it in a little bit, a public company CFO has very significant external stakeholders that you need to learn how to manage. If you don't do that well, that's a challenge. You don't face as much of that. With private equity, you need to know how to manage sponsors, which is they're another genus and species that requires its own care. So I think that knowing yourself, having the right set of skills and experiences, bringing that being able to cite specifically examples around what you've done in the past, the resume will help, but it doesn't get there. And then the other thing is avoid overdoing I, because it's going to label you in a way that probably is not what other people want.
That's great, and I want to emphasize one part of that. Not that all of it wasn't great, but the stories about where you've done an outcome.
Yeah.
Our team talks to the students about star stories and help build those star stories, which are stories that you can communicate to employers to really sell what you are capable of.
And by the way, don't follow my example, but you need to be pretty concise, by the way. Don't be too expansive.
Those star stories are important for our
Yes.
students and so giving them experiences that really lets them bring those stories to life and help them connect to the experiences they have before and during the program is just phenomenal. So I think that's great. I wanted to ask you something that's further out there for folks, but because of your board experiences, I just wanted to kind of learn a little bit about board readiness. I mean, you've been on boards in both public and private companies across different sectors, from real estate to learning management, business services, human capital management.
Yeah.
What is it that, what kind of advice could you give to people that are interested in one day becoming a board member?
So let me just say what it's not, and then I'll say what it is. So there's a perception that especially in public company boards, what they do is basically hang around, tell management what to do, collect the paycheck, and have meetings in fancy locations. Maybe that was the case, I don't know, 20 years ago. I don't know anything about that experience, but what I'll say now is that what boards are looking for is people who have domain-specific expertise in an area that's important to them, and in the board can bring that expertise to bear to provide guidance and counsel. So on the boards that I've been in, every single one, I've been pretty involved in mentoring the CFO, in providing advice as to issues that relate to the finances of the company. That's born of doing it for two public companies, so I know that. So I think that you need to, over time, build in your career areas of expertise where you can add value. So that's the first one. The second thing I'd say, and this is, I'm terrible at this, I would tell you, network. You got to network. It took me, I was late to the game because I didn't understand how critical networks are, especially at that level. Look, there's not a huge amount of public company director positions, and they go to people who have the qualities I just mentioned, but also are heavily networked. I have 3 people that I know. I was mentioning this earlier. I have 3 people who I know now that within 2 calls, and this is a little bit of an exaggeration, but not much, can basically get to anyone that I need to get to within 2 calls. That's because they're heavily networked and they network with others. And they are a marvel to see. I would say early on, network. And I would say there is no more powerful tool, very fortunate, than LinkedIn. LinkedIn is the tool par excellence. And if you really want to maximize your impact and in this area and your reach, understand LinkedIn. I don't mean understand how LinkedIn works. Understand the algorithms at a deep level, how they work. Understand how you connect with other people using LinkedIn, and use the tool. It is extremely powerful. I don't think there's a person, if we had a network of HR people sitting here, I would say, and I asked, okay, how many of you predominantly use LinkedIn to source? They would raise their hands, almost all. Why? It's easier to search now, one. The friction is much lower. But you can tailor it in a way that can find the proverbial needle in a haystack. And so use that very, very effectively. That's really kind of the tools, if you will. And then the other thing that's really important is there's a curious balance between adding value and being a contrarian. In that room, people actually want to get along with each other. So if you are the contrarian in the room, unless something's really wrong, by the way, there are times when you say, hey, I can't do that, see you later. You need to understand, again, this idea of, are you a team player? One of my references for a board once said to me, they asked me a really weird question. I said, what was the question? It said, do you think he's a person who, if we have a controversial decision, he would go along? I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, well, what'd you answer? I said, I think he listened to both sides, if it's unethical, he's not going to go along, which was a good answer. But the point is that boards, it's a microcosm of a management team in some ways. There's another level of people overseeing a company and its management, and trying to ensure that the business stays on track. So let me just quickly say one thing. What I just said is a little bit different in private equity. In private equity, you got one person writing a check. They form the role of all of those external stakeholders. And depending on private equity, I happen to be with a PE firm. I think it's the third largest or second in the world, called EQT. They try to run it a lot like a public company. But make no mistake, they're the ones writing the check. So you need to pay close attention to what it is that they want to happen in the company within all of the other domain. And again, how do you get there? It's network. I learned that very late in the game, and it worked out okay, but it could have worked more smoothly.
Well, thank you. That is really great information. I want to. You were telling me a story. And I want to transition to that story, which is, I think, going to lead to some shuffling of chairs here for a minute. But you were talking about how the value you think Simon Education has, and how you presented that to someone that you felt had incredible potential. You tell us this story.
Glad to do it. So one of the things that, when I was talking earlier today, some of you may have heard, I just think it's really important to invest in other people's potential. I really think that that's an important thing. That's part of, it's deeply ingrained in me, and I've done that throughout my career. So, when I realized I was getting closer to the end than to the beginning of my career at Paychex, I had a conversation with one of the people that I thought would be my successor, and I said to him, and he can recount it the way he wants to. I said, I think you're really talented and you do a really great job, but I think it would be really helpful to get your MBA. And my recollection of that experience was, his first comment was, I'm not sure I can do that. I'm not sure I can invest the time doing that. I said, okay, I hear what you're saying. I know it's a commitment, but remember, I'm really invested in your being able to do that. So just think about when you'll have that opportunity again. And I said, think about it again. And they came back to me and said, yeah, I think I'll do it. We'll make that happen. And I say that because I don't think you can do these jobs without that level of preparation. I personally believe. Now, can someone contradict me and say, yeah, sure they can, I agree. But here's my analogy, and it's a bad analogy, but it's an analogy nonetheless. Look, you can drive a car that's got basically only 3 or 4 gears, and you can be really good. I don't think you can win a Formula One race doing that, but I think you can do reasonably good. But isn't it better if the car's got 7 gears or 9 gears, or it's a CVT? I think in some ways that's what the set of skills that you get gives you. And it's up to you to use them. If you keep it in 3rd gear, that's okay. If you keep it in 4th gear, that's okay. But if you have that set of skills, it gives you a term that was really popular a decade or so ago, optionality. And I think in life, I want all the optionality I can get. That will determine, that lets me be in charge of what happens, as opposed to others dictating to me what's going to happen. So that happened. The rest, as they say, is history. So he'll tell his part of the story.
Well, I want to unveil the I don't know, the other character in this story and bring him up on stage. We're just super lucky to have Bob. Come on down. Yeah, we'll slide around here. We're super lucky to have Bob Schrader join us tonight. So yeah.
Unplanned, I found out about this morning. They invited Efrain to breakfast, and he mentioned that he was going to be giving the speech. I'm like, oh yeah, they invited me. I'm going to go. He's like, good. I want you to come up on stage. So it was a little bit of a last minute thing. At least he picked up the breakfast and paid for it. So I was you know that maybe I just pick up where Efrain left off. I mean that story was pretty accurate, and I just remember, I had an opportunity to come to Simon through the executive program when I was in my early 30s. I was working at Bob Schrader. Company agreed to pay for me, put me through the program, and at that time, I had only been married a couple of years, had 2 little kids. I was in a job where I was traveling 70 to 80% of the time, and I got cold feet, and I'm like, now's not the right time. And I always kind of regretted that decision, but I continued to have success in my career, and it never had really held me back. But it was always in the back of my mind that I didn't have my MBA, and then Efrain ended up recruiting me to go to Paychex, and I think this was either the first or second one-on-one meeting that I had with him, and he essentially really challenged me. He's like, listen, I really want you to go back and get your MBA, and I'm willing to support you in that. And I immediately got cold feet. At this point in time, I was in my early 40s. And I had 3 kids that were 8, 10, 12. They're in the soccer, gymnastics, traveling. I'm like, how am I going to manage this? And I got cold feet. And I remember trying to rationalize to him why I didn't think I needed my MBA. It never held me back. Had a lot of success. Had worked my way up at Bob Schrader, became vice president, controller of one of the largest business units. Efrain had recruited me to come to Paychex. It really never held me back. And I thought I made a lot of good arguments on why I didn't need my MBA. And the thing that I really am appreciative, among a lot of other things for Efrain, is he didn't let me off the hook. He really pushed me. He could easily said, yeah, you're right, Bob, you probably don't need to do this. And he really pushed me. He's like, no. He's like, if you want to sit in this seat, if you want to be in the C-suite of a public company, you need to go back to school and get your MBA. And I can tell you that you can do it without having your MBA. I don't think you can be as good of an executive as you could be, without having your MBA. And I certainly do not think I would be sitting in the seat that I sit in today without going through that signing experience and what that did for me. And I just think I'm a better executive today for having that experience. So I'm very appreciative of Efrain. It was interesting. Efrain is very reflective, and he always likes to ask questions that make you think. And after I finished the program, he took me to lunch. He's like, well, what did you learn? And I said, the biggest thing that I learned a lot. I don't want to say that I learned anything in the program. I learned a lot, but for me, it really gave me a sense of confidence. Not that I was a person that lacked confidence, but when you don't have your MBA, you don't know what you don't know. And when you're interacting with board members and executives, and many of them, and some of the ones on our board actually have their MBA from Simon School, it's always like, what do they know that I don't know? And so it really gave me a sense of confidence, belief in myself, and there's still a lot that I don't know, but at least today I know what I don't know, and I'm much more confident in having those conversations, particularly with our board members and other executives in the company.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
That's great. And the support of the Simon School and the recognition of the value it creates is just that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I want to ask, now that I've got both of you on the stage, I want to really dig into some AI questions because I love talking about AI.
Yeah.
So AI is coming. We are hearing about it all the time. It's got this potential to transform things. I think you said in an earlier conversation, it's transformative, but it's actually revolutionary. Mm-hmm. How do you see AI impacting the businesses that you're involved in? I mean, you're cutting across 4 different
Yeah.
organizations, and
Yeah.
right in the middle of
Yeah.
things with Paychex.
Yeah.
How do you see this making an impact, and how do we need to think about that as business
I'm going to let
evolves?
Bob go first,
Yeah.
because he's got to explain this to
Yeah.
investors all the time who are
Yeah.
asking him. So he's got his speech honed, and I'll tell you what's going on at
No.
the boards on that.
Yeah, well, first of all, as CFO of a public company, like people are like, what do you do? Like my wife's like, what do you do as a CFO? And as I tell her, I'm like, it's a sales job. Like any job, you're selling, right? I'm selling to the CEO, I'm selling to the board, and I'm selling to investors. And I spend, it was surprising me when I stepped into this role, the amount of time that I spend with investors. So I would probably say it's half of my time I spend with investors, and this is probably the #1 area of focus for investors is AI. They want to know how's it going to transform your business model. How are you going to leverage it to drive growth in your business model? So we spend a lot of time with that. Certainly at Paychex, as Efrain knows, we've been investing in these technologies for a number of years. We have AI agents that handle millions of interactions with our customers, and it typically can take care of about 80% of those interactions without any human involvement. So you can think about the impact that has just, from a dollars and cents standpoint on our business. So we've been at this for years. I would tell you we're now kind of dipping our, went from Gen AI, and the next evolution of that for us is agentic AI. So going from generating insights and answers to questions and those things to actually taking action. And so we just have launched a couple, just recently in the last, I'd say 3 to 4 months, a couple of agentic capabilities through both voice and phone, where someone can call up and talk to a voice agent. A small business can call up and give all the payroll information, the people, the number of hours, the rates, people that they've added, people that they've terminated, and all that information can be processed, and the payroll is paid to the employees without any human interaction at all. And so when I think about it's early innings of that, but I think about the impact that could have on our business, I think it's significant over time. And I'd say there's a couple angles to this. One, there's obviously a cost play. I would say I need less people to do that. And as a CFO, that's important to me, right? I'm trying to find ways to be more productive, more efficient, so we can expand our margins, deliver earnings growth to our investors, have dollars to invest back into other areas of the business, like our go-to-market capabilities. But the other area is really the customer experience, thinking about it through the lens of the customers. I think about my kids who are all in college, probably the same age as many of the people in this room, and they kind of grew up in the iPhone era. They don't want to talk to people. They want to use an app. They want to be able to solve problems, their stuff. And so these technologies really improve the overall customer experience. And so I think they have the potential to be huge for us. And if you think about Paychex is, we started out as a service company, like doing everything for small businesses. And when Efrain came in, he led a transformation of the company from being a service company to being a tech-enabled service company. And I think with these technologies, Gen AI and agentic AI, we're really on the cusp of our next transformation, really transforming from a tech-enabled service company to an expert-enabled technology company. And what does that mean for us? It really allows us to take care of kind of the lower value interactions with our clients, have the AI agents do that, have technology do that, and then we can focus our human capital resources on those higher value interactions with our client, and that's really with our clients, and that's really what's going to continue to differentiate us and separate us from the competition. So we're really excited about it. I think it has the potential to have a huge impact on our business as we move forward.
So a couple things on the companies. It's a great overview, because I think what that illustrates is that where you're seeing a lot of movement is on the agentic side and the ability to transform that service essentially into technology. And I think that's a wave that's not going to stop. That's a huge, huge deal. But the other side is where the use cases you see, programming is one. It's revolutionized the way code is written, who writes the code or what writes the code. That part is now just unbelievably different and automated. And so across the companies I'm on, we talk about, okay, how are you deploying that? Because those use cases are really, really well established. On the agentic side, the interesting part is that there's a big debate going on with respect to what's the ROI here, and you're seeing that. So trillions of dollars have poured into investment on agentic AI, but the question is, where's the ROI and where are the use cases that are going to generate that ROI? I think we're still in the middle of figuring all of that out. I happen to be a little bit more optimistic. I think it's going to be human plus machine, but the human part is still being defined. We're in a really unusual situation here where the way that the work that many people in this room, what they do, not only what they do, but how they do it and what is done is going to be completely different. Going to be faster, it's going to be more effective, it's going to be more error-free, it's going to be all of that. But we haven't defined yet exactly how all of that's working, and boards are struggling with how much do I spend now? You're seeing this if you're watching what's happening in the market. I don't want to spend too much now without a guaranteed return. On the other hand, there's a lot of FOMO in the market. Like, if I don't invest, I'm in trouble because I'm going to fall. There's going to be a cycle where I fall. I don't know what the answers to all of that is, and it's interesting in every single board, a little bit of a different conversation, different flavor of that conversation going on.
I think the other thing I would add there is if you think about AI, there's this narrative out there on what it's going to do to labor markets and how it's going to disrupt labor markets and what's going to happen to unemployment and those type of things. And if you look at the valuations of software companies and seat-based models, I think we've all been hurt a little bit about that. But I look at it a little bit differently. If you think about where we are as a society, right now, there's not a lot of labor demand, obviously, just given the overall uncertainty, tariffs, interest rates, all those things that are causing businesses to kind of wait and see what's going on. But even if we had that, even if the labor demand was there, we have a labor supply issue, right? If you think about aging demographics, immigration's down, birth rates are down, and so if we think about it as a society, how are we going to grow our economy as we move forward if we don't have the people? I think AI is going to be the enabler that really helps plug that gap for us, and so we can continue to drive productivity, having fewer people, and really still grow our economy as we move forward.
I love that. A solution, not a problem.
A solution, yes.
That's great. So I want to ask one question to get just quick response because I want to be able to ask the audience to get us some questions. But AI can't do everything. What's the key thing that we should be thinking about for them to be thinking about that they need to make sure they have that AI is not going to be able to do? And just a quick answer before we hop to...
I mean, Efrain, I think, hit on it earlier, and it's this whole concept about leadership and the ability to influence those things. AI is not going to replace tacit knowledge. It just isn't. So like the knowledge that you gain over time through your, I've been working 30 years now, all of those experiences, your instinct, your perspective, I'm sorry, AI is not going to replace that. It's not going to disintermediate someone that has a Simon MBA. I'm confident that you'll be able to adapt, but really those leadership skills, those intangible skills that Efrain was kind of referring to earlier, AI is not going to replace that.
Yeah, I would say that, so I have a colleague who's on the board of Cisco and is really one of the thought leaders in the area. And I was talking with him about this, and I was challenging him on the use of the models that inform AI, especially when you're looking at public information. And one of the things that he said to me was, AI has gotten pretty close to the limit of the information that is available publicly to train the models. What he meant was, if you look at the sources of data from which each of the AI models is drawing. It's kind of an interesting conversation, but the point is it's publicly available information, everyone's drawing from it. But here's the thing, the treasure trove of data that still remains unexploited is all of the data in private hands. And I will tell you that Paychex will not release that publicly, nor will any other company. So what's that mean? The implication is this. Someone is going to have to work in the background to figure out how to train all of those models. And I come back to something that I said earlier. If you don't have the skill set to determine when that model is hallucinating versus when it's not, that's a combination of tacit knowledge and some of the analysis skills that you're getting, I think you're in trouble. I think the company's going to be in trouble because it's going to release an agent that is going to do a lot of potential damage to the company. I really think that's where you're going to, I think that's where there's going to be a premium on people who can do that and people who understand the technology, and a premium finally on the analysis skills that help them get to the right solution.
Thank you for those answers. So we want to open it up to the audience to ask questions. So if you've got a question, raise your hand. Okay, since he's right nearby, I'm going to hand you a mic. Maybe, Nate, I see you moving. You want to come down and get a mic to help move around? There you go.
Hi, thank you so much for your speech. Thank you for the insights. My name is Mark, and I have a question about the networking. So you mentioned how it is very important, and that LinkedIn is very important too. So what would be, other than LinkedIn, probably the most important advice you would give someone like student and assignment business to connect with former and current people of Paychex or any other company?
So I didn't catch the question completely. If you could just sort of.
Yeah, of course. Just what would be more like the most advice you can get, like in-person connections, like how to establish this, I would say strong connection that you can come back to.
Yeah. You want to talk to that, or do you want me to?
I mean, I can give my thoughts. You can chime in. I think you shouldn't be afraid to reach out and ask. Get outside of your comfort zone. I think having mentors and networking. I'm in my mid-50s. I've been working 30 years, and this guy still mentors me. I think it's good for all of us to broaden your network. Certainly, you should have mentors. I think it's really important. I tell my kids this all the time, to surround yourself with successful people. I mean, success is very hard to achieve on your own, and so you become a product of your environment. So you want to build those networks. You want to surround yourself with successful people, but just don't be afraid to ask, because people like Efrain, myself, others that have been successful, they're more than willing to kind of share those experiences with you. You just need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and ask, and I'm sure most of the time you'll get a yes, and people are willing to help you out and share their perspective and experiences and help you reach your career goals.
Yeah, I would just say that something similar, which is basically, I'd say, I really completely misunderstood that networking isn't something that you do in your spare time. It's part of what you do professionally. So if you have X amount of hours in a day, you need to think about what's my strategy for, I say networking. You asked about mentoring, right? I think people are very willing to connect. And I think there's a great community in Simon that is very, very willing to connect. I think the part that's really important is you need to take a step. You need to initiate, because people are very willing to do it. And actually, it's good. Bob said I mentor him. He mentors me when it's not a one-way street. It's part of that. And by the way, let's step one step above and say it's part of the human connection. People want to do that, but they need to be asked. And that's why, by the way, I purposely said LinkedIn. If you're a shy person, and look, many of us in certain situations are, you'd be surprised what pinging someone on LinkedIn could do. I would say you'll get if you have a connection with the person and can establish that, you can create that connection very easily without a lot of personal capital, and I think most people will at least make an effort to connect. So I hope that's responsive. Yeah.
Got him up there.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I'm alumni class 2023. My question is, what are the needs or pains, but not in a professional way, but more in a human or personal way, once that you achieve to be C-level? My point is, like, most of the time when you know, or in this case, I'm seeing you as like, okay, superhero, super power guy, like nerves of steel, success after success.
Yeah.
But as you already said, we are humans and the human connection and so on. So once that you achieve C-level, what is the biggest pain that you could say that you are kind of living all the time, but more in a personal or human way?
Oh, that is a great question. I'll share a story, real quick story. So this is me, by the way. This is my answer. Every one of you may have a different answer. First of all, the first thing I want to be very clear on is success has nothing to do with money. Zero. Some of the most miserable people I've ever met are very, very wealthy. So don't aspire to do that alone.
It helps a little bit.
It solves problems, I will agree. But so in that period between when I was describing, when I left Bob Schrader, I went into higher ed and did kind of a labor of service. I had to drive about an hour and a half to get there. And I started listening to this motivational speaker. His name was Jim Rohn. Doesn't matter, you can look him up, whatever. And so I'm listening one day, and he starts talking about his experience with his personal success. And he says, the first reason to achieve a measure of professional success is to be able to take care of the people that are important to you in your family. And that's a noble thing, that's a great thing. The second thing is, and by the way, look, it depends. You could be alone or you could have a family, that's important, I get that, that's a human thing. The second thing is, maybe you get past that to a point where you can leave a little bit in reserve to help other people, maybe to save for your future and help other people. Okay, that's fine. And then the third instance, let's say you're very, very successful, and now you've taken care of those two. Then what? And his answer really struck me. He said, the only possible reason to do that, in his mind, was that you have that much more to help others. I thought, now there's an idea. If you can get yourself to a point where now success is not just about my climbing a certain rung in the ladders, but now you've gotten to a point where your life is about helping others and paying it forward, etc. That's another level of success. By the way, I'm not going to say I'm a shining example of it, but I get it. I get it completely. And I think that aspire to your definition of success, but whatever definition of success it is, aspire that it includes involving others. There's a raft, again, of academic literature that says when we do that, we feel better. We feel more fulfilled, more complete. So that would be my answer to that. Yeah.
My name is Kaylin Brown. I am a first-year MBA student. And thank you for that previous answer. It led me to think of something that I heard a keynote speaker say last year. Learn more to earn more to return more.
Yeah,
I
very
want to be
good.
a future CEO.
You got it better than I do. That's very good.
Easy to remember.
I'll steal it from you. Yeah,
Learn
yeah.
more, earn more, return more.
Yeah,
And
you got it.
in the nature of that, I want to be a future CEO. So my question is regarding the board members and the executives.
Yeah.
At the board level, what separates executives who are viewed as trusted strategic partners from those who are just seen as functional experts? And how can leaders make that transition intentionally?
So I'm going to just narrow it down to one. I could probably talk, and I'll let Bob also talk this. I would say this. CFOs in particular in boards play a really unique role because they have to both represent the actual performance of the company, and they also have to be, they have to state it in a way that there is no doubt about the ethics and integrity of the information they're delivering. Now, that doesn't happen in every company. We can point to a bunch of them where that didn't happen. But I would say it is absolutely lethal when you're sitting on the other side and you start to have questions about whether what you're hearing is actually correct or not. So I would say learning to straddle that line between presenting effectively the information, and look, every data doesn't always just speak for itself, it needs to be interpreted. But when you interpret it, when you do that, you have to be in a position where there's no doubt that, that it's being presented fairly. And when there are problems with the presentation of that data not being fair, you've got a problem, and you're going to have a big problem on the board. By the way, this is real experience. I had sat there where the person left the room and they said, we have a problem here, we need to change that person. So I think that's really, that's at the heart of what you do. By the way, that's just management in general. You have to do that. So, Bob, you?
Yeah, no, I think transparency is of utmost importance. We have multiple board meetings every year, and we have different executives that come in and out, and they ask me for advice. How should I present this information? And I think you got to present a balanced view. I think there's a tendency to go into these meetings and you want to paint everything in the best light because, again, you're selling to the board, and I think if you can kind of paint a balanced view of what's working well, but also being transparent on the things that we as an organization need to do better, I think you earn trust and credibility with your board, and I think the executives that do that tend to have the most success with their board members.
All right. We got one more question. We'll have to do quick answers to this
Okay,
one.
I will, yeah.
I know we're over on time. Hi, my name is Veronica Huddleston. I'm an alumni of Simon from my Master's in Analytics and my MBA. I want to circle back to the topic of AI.
Yep.
I work in risk management and banking, and I think that a lot of people, when they think of AI and the risks, we think of the big three: data privacy, security, and job displacement, as we were talking about earlier. What is a public company who's already been implementing generative AI and agentic AI, how do you build a framework at the company to identify these risks?
Yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of them are
Yeah.
third-party vendors, and they have complex infrastructures. And after you identify them, how do you manage them from there?
Yeah, I mean, at Paychex, we have a team, we have a committee of internal executives that represent all the different functional areas, from risk management to the finance team, obviously to the legal team, and that team meets on a regular basis and really is making sure that we're making the right decisions. We're doing assessments around our vendors and what they're doing from an AI standpoint. Obviously, protecting our clients' data, as Efrain mentioned, is of utmost importance. We don't want to lose that trust with our clients. So it's certainly an area of focus, and that's how we manage it. We manage it through a committee of senior executives in the company, and then there is board level reporting to the different committees of the board as well as the full board itself on, what are the areas that we're focused on, what are the risks, and how we are addressing them.
I completely agree with Bob. This reminds me of cybersecurity probably
Yeah.
10 or 12 years ago. So cyber was like, hey, make sure no one's hacking us, we're all good. And then it was, no, wait a second. You need an architecture and a governance structure to make it work. And every company that I'm involved with now has a cyber subcommittee or it's reporting directly to the board. And I think that those governance models are being developed, but they're very important and probably needs its own governance structure to make it work.
All right. Well,
I
this is
think there was one more, Mitch. I don't want to
I have two
cut
questions.
him off. Okay.
okay. Real quick. Go ahead.
From your experience in C-suite, what are the most effective ways to build and lead high-performing teams, especially when influencing people without formal authority?
Okay, so high performance team. So this is going to sound a little non-obvious, but I found that it's really important. And first of all, I'm assuming some basic things. That you're clear about what you're trying to do. You define the parameters of what the team is attempting to accomplish. I say that, and you would be amazed at how many times you have a team and the goals are not clear. The timelines are not clear. It's not clear what the budget is, et cetera. So I'm assuming all of that's true. So you got to get all of that right. But then there's the magic ingredient, and it's trust. I would say you have to build an environment of trust within a team so that when things are not going well, and they won't go well all the time, someone feels comfortable coming to you and saying, hey, you know what, this isn't working out, and maybe I don't have an answer. Can we huddle on it and have a discussion about what's next? That saves you so many problems, and it leads to the functioning of the team in a way that's great. I mentioned, or Mitch mentioned, I'm on the board of a company called Franklin Covey, and one of the books that came out of that company was Working at the Speed of Trust. So when we're talking in that company about trust, we talk about speed of trust. In other words, when you are a team, having trust doesn't slow you down, it speeds you up. So if you can build trust, it's literally, you're in a meeting and you look at someone and you know they got what you got, as opposed to having a lengthy conversation about how to get to the end. So assuming you've gotten all those other things right, trust, I think, is the magic or the secret ingredient. So.
One more question. When scaling a business, what did you personally underestimate early on, and what would you prioritize differently if you were starting again today?
I didn't catch the beginning of that question.
When scaling a business, what
Okay.
did you personally underestimate early on, and what would you prioritize differently if you were starting again today?
Yeah, look, in scaling, it's simple. Look, I don't know the correct answer in everything, but I would say this. Pilot clearly, fail fast, start again. If you can't do that, if you waste a lot of time being invested in your idea and then just grinding dollars through that idea without being very candid about whether it's working, you're gonna waste a lot of time and you're probably not gonna be successful. Get it straight, fail fast, get the right pilot, move on. Don't fall in love with your idea. When that's worked, it's worked really well. At least when it hasn't, you haven't burned a lot of money in the process. So that was my answer.
All right. Well, clearly we could keep going. As I said at the beginning, all night long. But we got to close the session, and I want to first of all say thank you to all of you for joining. Obviously, these kind of experiences isn't possible without the inclusion of the community that we have, and this is so important to us here to create this kind of exchange that informs our lives together. I, of course, also want to thank Efrain for joining us. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights. And for this special privilege of getting an extra amount of insight with Bob. Thank you so much.